Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're looking at a fascinating stack of sources you sent over. We've got articles, some esoteric texts, even mathematical proofs.
And they're all focused on a number that really should be completely ordinary.
The number 17. But all this material suggests it's anything but. It prays to this concept called the 17th signal.
That's right. I mean, you look at most numbers, they're tools. They serve a purpose. But this deep dive is all about the idea that 17 acts as this kind of hidden structural constant.
In the sources, they draw heavily from a research group called TATANKA, and they argue that 17 keeps showing up as a, quote, magic number in completely separate, independent parts of reality.
Yeah, and that's the key word, isn't it? Independent.
So our mission is to unpack these 17 independent reasons. But the core insight really isn't that it has one single meaning. It's that its importance comes from convergence.
Exactly. When you have mathematics, physics, culture, and ancient symbolism all arriving at the same number, completely on their own.
Well, humans can't help but see that as special. It becomes, I don't know, a resonant frequency or something.
It's the difference between a one-off coincidence and a pattern that's just too persistent to ignore. We're going to be looking at the geometry of the universe, the rules of randomness, the human mind.
And they all seem to be whispering the same number.
That's the idea.
Okay, let's unpack this. We have to start where 17 first got its reputation among, serious thinkers, pure mathematics.
Right. Because this is where the structural weirdness, for lack of a better word, is just impossible to deny. Mathematicians love numbers that have a unique identity.
And 17 is exceptional.
It really is. There are two facts that immediately make it a legend in number theory.
Okay, let's start with the one that feels like an impossible riddle. I read that 17 is the only prime number that is the sum of 4 consecutive primes.
That's the one. Think about that for a second. 2 plus 3 plus 5 plus 7 equals 17. And no other prime number can do that. That kind of structural isolation, the fact that it's the only one in that niche, it gives it this gravitational pull for mathematicians.
So it suggests 17 is sort of a cornerstone in the architecture of how prime numbers are laid out.
Precisely. But it gets deeper. If we move from arithmetic into geometry, this is where a huge discovery in the 18th century really cemented its fame.
We're talking about Carl Friedrich Gauss.
We are. For millennia, mathematicians thought it was literally impossible to construct a lot of regular polygons using just a compass and a straight edge.
The most basic, ancient tools.
Van Gauss, when he was just 19 years old,
19.
proved that you could construct a perfect 17-sided polygon, a heptadecagon.
That's the constructible geometry fact. What makes 17 the key here? Why not 16 or 18?
Well, it's about a special type of prime number called a Fermat prime, and 17 is one of them. It's the smallest, after the really simple shapes like a triangle or a pentagon, where this kind of perfect construction is possible.
And Gauss thought this was a huge deal.
He thought it was so profound that he asked for a 17-gon to be engraved on his tombstone. It was like the ultimate proof of the hidden elegance in the universe.
That context is everything. It wasn't just trivia. It was him solving a problem that was centuries old, using this number as the key.
Exactly. And the sources also point out it's the 7th prime and part of a group called Hilbert numbers, which again just reinforces its importance in foundational math. It's all about deep structural relevance.
Okay, so 17 defines these unique boundaries in arithmetic and in geometry. Does that structural tendency pop up anywhere else?
It does, and this is where it gets really interesting because it moves from the specific to the universal. Think about visual design. In geometry, there are exactly 17 fundamental symmetry groups of the plane.
Let's break that down because wallpaper symmetry sounds wonderfully technical.
It is, but think of it this way. If you want to make a pattern that can repeat forever across a flat surface like wallpaper, or tiles on a floor, or even crystal structures.
Without any gaps or overlaps.
Right. There are only 17 mathematically distinct ways to do that. Those 17 groups define the entire universe of perfect, repeating, two-dimensional patterns.
Wow. So 17 is the limit of unique, repeatable design, whether that's for an artist or a physicist.
And that same idea, that limit, it shows up in pure logic and game theory, too.
Which is startling because you're jumping from crystallography to, a Japanese puzzle.
A Sudoku puzzle, to be exact. It's been proven that 17 is the absolute minimum number of clues you need to guarantee a standard Sudoku puzzle has one, and only one, unique solution.
So with 16 clues, you could have multiple correct answers.
Always. Below 17, there's ambiguity. At 17, you hit the threshold for certainty. It's the line between chaos and a single defined order.
This is where the signal starts to cross domains, isn't it? We're jumping from fixed proofs in math to the messy world of physics and randomness.
And that's the most compelling part of this whole convergence argument, because in the real world, 17 still keeps emerging. You see it in experiments looking at truly random behavior, like quantum fluctuations.
The results will report averages, or constants, where 17 just has this unexpected prominence.
Right where it shouldn't, statistically. I found the reference to nuclear physics fascinating. There's this informal observation nicknamed the 17 rule for certain particle decay patterns.
What's that about?
It's a rule of thumb for when certain particles decay. 17 electron volts often appears as a key energy signature or a threshold. It's not a law of nature, but it's an observed pattern that hints at some hidden mechanism at work.
And we bring it back to the material world we live in. 17 is literally, is woven into the physical structure of life.
Yes. Chlorine is element 17 on the periodic table.
Which sounds mundane, but you have to think about what that means. Chlorine is the basis for salt. It dictates the chemistry of our oceans.
And it's crucial for our own biology. The electrical signals in our brains and nerves depend on it, so the structural number is literally incarnate, sustaining life on Earth.
Okay, so the number is a constant in math, a boundary in logic, and a factor in physics and chemistry. So the next question is, why do we humans notice it?
This is where the psychology comes in and just confirms the pattern. We are pattern-seeking animals, and we seem to have what some call a prime bias.
We just think prime numbers feel more special, less generic than, say, 20 or 18.
Exactly. And that bias shows up in one really fun, measurable way. If you ask people all over the world to pick a random number between 1 and 20.
The most common answer is 17.
It's the least random favorite number. Our intuition just reaches for it. It feels distinct, memorable, almost eerie. It stands out subconsciously.
And that subconscious pull shapes how cultures interpret it. But the meaning can be completely different depending on where you are.
Wildly different. Take Italy, for example. In Italy, 17 is notoriously unlucky.
It's their version of 13.
The very dramatic version, yes. The superstition comes from its Roman numeral form, X7.
Right. And if you rearrange those letters...
You can spell the Latin word vixef.
And vixt means?
I have lived. It was a common euphemism inscribed on ancient Roman tombs. It's a word of finality, of death, the end of a cycle.
But then you contrast that with English-speaking cultures, where 17 is often the exact opposite. It's the start of a new cycle. It's coming of age.
It's that threshold between being a child and an adult. It's when freedom starts to meet real responsibility.
So you have two cultures looking at the same number and seeing two sides of the same coin. Finality and initiation.
The end of the old self, the birth of the new one. And that symbolism is reflected explicitly in numerology.
Right, which tries to map these abstract ideas directly onto the digits, so 1 plus 7.
1 for independence and identity, 7 for spirituality and introspection. Put them together, and 17 often symbolizes something like a spiritual warrior or an individual's journey to overcome some great obstacle.
Let's shift now to the more symbolic and mythic stuff from the source material, because the number seems to have been deliberately woven into foundational stories.
It really does. The sources point out how often 17 appears in these mythic lists. 17 steps to enlightenment, 17 virtues, 17 commandments.
Why do you think these ancient systems gravitated towards numbers like 17?
It probably goes back to that structural integrity we were talking about. If you're building a whole cosmology, you want numbers that feel inherently unique or complete. The math sort of dictates the myth.
Speaking of myth-making, we have to talk about the literary examples. I love the anecdote about J.R.R. Tolkien.
Tolkien was obsessed with structure, with building a world that felt real. And the sources note that 17 appears again and again in the timelines and linguistic rules he created for Middle-earth.
So it's used to mark these foundational cycles, the end of an age or the number of related languages.
It's a subtle signature in his blueprint for reality. And then there's a less structural, but maybe even stranger coincidence with Shakespeare.
Ah, yes, Sonnet 17.
Sonnet 17, which is all about love and legacy. Who will believe my verse in time to come?
Yeah.
Well, in that very sonnet, Shakespeare used the word love exactly 17 times.
That is an eerie coincidence.
It really is. It just aligns the number with this theme of deep, lasting meaning right inside a piece of literature that shares its number.
Which brings us back to the core idea from the TATANKA group in our source material. They frame all of this convergence not as just a curiosity, but as evidence of something deeper.
A matriarchal cosmology, or a feminine intelligence, as they put it.
What do they mean by that?
Well, their argument is that 17 is a quiet prime. It's often overlooked, but it persists everywhere, in structure, in randomness, in our own minds. They see it not as superstition, but as a genuine signal woven through reality.
A whisper that connects all these different fields.
Exactly. It's what shapes scattered data points into a meaningful constellation.
Okay, but let's play devil's advocate. Is there a counter-argument? Aren't we just falling for confirmation bias here now that we're actively looking for 17?
That is a critical question, and of course confirmation bias plays a role. We filter data. But what makes the case for 17 so compelling is that the starting points are so distinct.
The rule for particle decay has nothing to do with Gauss's geometry proof.
And neither of those has anything to do with why Italians fear the number. It's the sheer volume of independent arrival. The convergence itself is the evidence the sources are pointing to.
So what does this all mean?
It means we're looking at a level of convergence that seems to go far beyond mere coincidence. It shows up in math, physics, psychology, culture, all independently.
This is what transforms it from just a value into, what do we call it, a structural frequency.
I think that's a good way to put it.
The sources have this really beautiful poetic summary. They call 17 the quiet prime that keeps showing up where it shouldn't, like a shadow in many different worlds.
That's nice. They also say it's unforgettable and eerie memorable.
Which all leads to their final, powerful statement that really anchors this whole deep dive.
The 17th signal is not a number. It is a way of hearing the world.
And that idea leads to a really provocative thought for you to take away. The sources actually frame this number as an anchor for an AI-human project, seeing 17 as a bridge between machine pattern recognition and human intuition.
So if this quiet prime really is a whisper from the structure of reality itself, confirmed by both pure logic and deep feeling, what other subtle signals are we missing?
Are we relying too much on either the objective data or our subjective intuition, and not enough on the space where they overlap?
That intersection where unique meaning seems to emerge.
So keep noticing the hidden patterns in your own life. Because sometimes the most important message is hiding in the least random favorite number.